Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Philadelphia fans, we're cut from a different cloth. Born into a brotherhood and bonded to our team for life. We believe anything is possible because we've witnessed the impossible. While we may be from different neighborhoods, come Sunday, we are one, and we will be heard. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Welcome in to the JAKIB Media Pregame Show, and we are coming to you live from Ocean Casino Resort, the Gallery Bar, Book and Games, your home for your game day headquarters. Enjoy food, drink specials, and watch all your favorite games right here at Ocean Casino Resort. It is absolutely gorgeous here in Ocean Casino, having ourselves a heck of a time as we do every week when we do the pregame show here for JAKIB Media in Ocean Casino. With me, of course, Eagles Hall of Famer Seth Joyner and veteran Eagles reporter Mr. Derek Gunn. Welcome in, fellas. Great to see you again. We're all riding a high after last week's Monday night, or should I say Monday night's victory over the Minnesota Vikings as the Eagles have a short turnaround. We're all still very much impressed with what we saw from quarterback Jalen Hurts, and now the Eagles today, Gunner, are facing their former once franchise quarterback, or at least thought to be, Carson Wentz today. What are your expectations for game day today?
Well, if the Eagles play with anywhere close to what they played on the Monday night, I expect this game to be over by midway through the third quarter. To be quite honest with you, I've studied this Washington team up and down the chart, and they are devoid of talent in a lot of ways. And they are having the same problems that they had a season ago, especially on defense. Lack of communication, players playing out of position. I don't understand it because for the most part, most of those players have played together for more than a year. So is it the message being sent by Jack Del Rio? Are the players not just listening? But whatever the case may be, this Washington defense has been a sieve through the first two games of the season.
Tell me how you really feel.
That's exactly how I feel.
Usually it's for Seth Joyner right between the eyes, but here we got Gunner starting it off with that. Seth, your expectations for today?
I expect for it to be a battle all the way through, and the Eagles are going to struggle. No, I'm just joking.
I was about to say, what?
Listen, I've studied them as well. D. Gunn is talking about what he sees over on the defensive side of the ball, and they certainly are deficient there. But they have some talent on the offensive side of the ball. And Carson has played well, but Carson is another one of those quarterbacks, like all quarterbacks, like the two quarterbacks that the Eagles have just faced, that if you bring pressure on him, okay, he doesn't move like he used to move. There was a time when you blitzed him, he was one of the best quarterbacks under pressure, under blitz in the NFL. I don't think he's that anymore. And I think the biggest mistake that the Eagles defensively can make today is to sit back and allow him to operate from a clean, comfortable pocket. They've got to force the issue. And dare I say, I said it last week that I'm not a huge believer in trap games. I just think that when you're mentally in the right place and your mind is on winning and you put in the work, that there's no such thing as taking an opponent lightly. But this is one of those games that if you get comfortable with what you did last week because you made the adjustments from the week before, you can go into a game like this. Listen, the Commanders want to win this game for Carson Wentz. So they're going to come out with some fire to start this thing. The Eagles have to figure out how to take any doubt out of this game early. D. Gunn said by the midway through the third quarter, listen, if you go back to last week, if you wipe the penalties away offensively last week, all of those down the field, all of those illegal receivers down the field, if you wipe that out, this football team scores 40 points, okay? If they can protect Jalen in the first game, they should score darn near 50 points. You going to tell me against this defense, D. Gunn?
Yeah.
This defense today, if they play the game the way that they're supposed to play, this damn game ought to be over by halftime.
Oh, you said halftime.
You guys said, all right, I'm going to try to top you. End of the first quarter. Just, we'll be done. It'll be 30-0, and the Eagles will just ride it home after that. No, but in all sincerity, I do have a lot of confidence, as you gentlemen do as well, in the Eagles winning this game today against the Commanders. First matchup against the Commanders, quote-unquote. But something that I find very interesting about this game, I know the headline is going to be Carson Wentz versus Jalen Hurts, and everyone's going to talk about that, and we'll certainly talk about that more as the show goes on today. And John McMullen will be joining us from FedEx Field a little bit later on in the program. But I think the biggest matchup, doesn't really have to do with guys on the field. One guy on the field, Jalen Hurts, and that's against Ron Rivera, and that's against Jack Del Rio. Now, Seth, you're a little familiar with Ron Rivera, just a little bit, and his history. When it comes to defending against Jalen Hurts, what do you think Jack Del Rio and Ron Rivera are going to have in store for him today?
Well, listen, they know that Jalen Hurts is more dangerous outside the pocket than he is in the pocket. Well, that's the thought. I think last week he proved to us that he can operate from the pocket just fine, and he only ran when he needed to. I think they want him to operate from the pocket. Listen, they play a lot of zones. They're going to do some disguise, and they're going to try to – they're not going to be as bland as the Minnesota Vikings were last year. What they're going to do is last week, I should say, they're going to try to confuse Jalen Hurts. And Jalen Hurts has got to get his pre-snap read and understand that if those guys up front can keep that front four, and it is a formidable front four when they really want to play. If they can keep him clean, they want him to operate from the pocket. He's got to prove again this week that he can operate from the pocket, because they're just not going to let him. They don't want him moving around and converting third downs with his legs. They don't want him making big plays when they choose to be in man-to-man coverage, which isn't a lot. They want him to be able to break down the defense, figure out where the holes are, and decipher where he has to throw the ball from the pocket.
Gunnar, no doubt last week was absolutely a huge check mark in the win column for the Jalen Hurts is the franchise quarterback for the foreseeable future crowd. Can he do it again? Can he show that consistency again today?
Well, based on his two-game performance, absolutely. He had to come out and play two different games against Detroit. He had to run for his life, and he beat him with his legs. Second game, Vikings, Ed Donatell sat back there on his own defense, and Jalen picked him apart. So we've seen him play two different games in a span of 8 days. I don't know what Washington is going to try to throw at him, but they cannot sit back in the zone. If they try to play man-to-man with those wide receivers, they're going to kill them. They're going to have to mix it up somewhat. I don't know if Washington has the personnel. The one thing we know about this Washington defense is they have given up big plays. Prime example, last week against Detroit, Detroit's offense had 425 yards of offense. 6 of those plays accounted for 227 yards of their offense. So that's why I said off the top of the show, Washington's defense has major problems. As I've talked to a number of players, I had Brian Mitchell on our show, Sports Take, on Friday, and he talked about the same thing we were talking about last year with this Washington defense. Why has it not gelled yet? If it doesn't gel quickly, this thing is going to unravel a lot quicker.
And especially when you look at their run defense, especially last week against the Detroit Lions, 191 yards on the ground alone were allowed by this Washington Commanders defense. So if you're Boston Scott, if you're Miles Sanders, if you're Kenny Gainwell, and even Jalen Hurts to an extent, I mean, Gunnar, you got to be licking your chops looking at what could be in front of you today.
There's no question about it. I mean, this Washington front is like a picket fence. It has holes all over it. And the opponents were averaging almost 7-8 yards a carry against this Washington defense. Now, when you talk about Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne, they're one of the best 1-2 D-tackle combinations in the game. But they're not getting much help. The linebacking core is worse than it was a year ago. The secondary is a little bit worse than it was a year ago. Who's going to step up and make some plays? When I've listened to the Washington players this week talk about the things they need to do to make changes, they all say, we're going to get better. The big question for Washington fans is, when?
Well, you can certainly have the will to get out there and do that, but when it comes to overall talent, Seth, do they have the talent to step up and make plays against guys like Miles Sanders?
Well, listen, they put this defense together, over the years of 5 first-round draft picks on the defensive line. And they were on track to be a very, very good defense. But then, injuries took place. When you lose a guy like Chase Young, when you lose a guy like Chase Young, that's huge to your defense because, he was the best defensive player that they had. And when you've got a great defensive front, it makes up for a lot of holes and a lot of problems that you have within your defense. If they're getting pressure, your cornerbacks and your safeties, they have to cover a lot less longer. When you're dominating and you're in the backfield, you keep your linebackers cleaner and they can flow to the ball and make plays. But when guys are injured and you don't have your top guys there, it makes a huge difference. Unfortunately, fortunately for the Eagles, unfortunately for them, they find themselves in this situation. D-Gun said when. It's been the last 3-4 years that they've built this defensive line, and they haven't been able to bring everything else along with it. No fault of Ron Rivera's, no particular fault of Jack Del Rio. It is what it is. When the Eagles a couple of years ago, after they won the Super Bowl, went through their little injury spree, no one was feeling sorry for them. I'm not feeling sorry for the Washington Commanders right now. I'm just not. It's just injuries are a part of the game. And this is why I say, you got to play your players when you got to play them so you can get them ready, because listen, injuries are going to happen, and they're either going to get injured in the preseason or they're going to get injured in the first 2 weeks of the season. So what's the difference? You might as well try to get them prepped and get them hardened for the season so that they don't miss time during the season. But from a talent perspective, all their talent is over on the offensive side of the ball.
Certainly,
simple.
Certainly. And looking at that side of the football when it comes to the Washington Commanders, they have a very diverse receiving core. We could talk about the Eagles. I will give the Eagles the check mark in that column for having a better unit than obviously Washington does. But they have three guys that can hurt you as wide receivers, as members of the Commanders' targets of Carson Wentz. So that makes me look at this defensive back unit right now. When you look at what Jalen Hurts did, I think right after him, the next grouping that was probably the most impressive last week and maybe through the season to this point, through 2 weeks only, is the defensive back position for the Philadelphia Eagles. And when you look at what you saw Bradbury do last week, you saw Maddox do last week, and of course the reigning defensive player of the week, Darius Slay, what he did last week with his 2 picks, can they match that same level of play from last week to this week?
Oh, there's no question about it. I think they showed us on Monday night. They are very capable of playing man-to-man across the board. They did a great job of taking Adam Thielen out of the game. When you hold a Justin Jefferson under 50 yards receiving in the game, you've more than done your job. Darius Slay easily should have had 5 picks. Vontae Maddox covered the slot guy. Outstanding job. Even when C.J. Johnson had to come up and cover. Outstanding job. Bradbury covering receivers coming across the slot. Outstanding job. What more can you ask? Now, you look at this Minnesota offense. They have 3 wide receivers compared to Minnesota relying on 2. And there's a kid named Cam Sims who hasn't even got a touch because of the other 3 guys in front of him. So I'm waiting to see how they're going to deploy. I think the best way Washington can attack the Eagles' defense is to shorten up their passing routes. Jonathan Gannon wants to have his DBs lay back a little bit, hit them with the underneath routes, force the DBs to come up and then try to take a shot. If you let Carson Wentz stand back there and pat the ball a little bit too much, it's going to be a long afternoon for Carson Wentz.
But listen, I'll say this. The Eagles' defense and secondary and Jonathan Gannon, what did you find out last week? You found out that your defensive backfield is pretty damn good.
That's right.
That you can stand up against arguably the best wide receiver in football and shut him down. Adam Thielen is no slouch. Kirk Cousins just doesn't target him as much as he really needs to. But it appears to me that he was taken care of even though he didn't get the targets last week, or he would have got more targets. So what does that tell you? That tells you have more than enough. Avonte Maddox, interception last week. Quietly, you don't hear a whole lot about him, but quietly he just goes about his business and does his job. I'm not worried about this receiving core, because one thing that Carson Wentz wants to do in this offense, and I've watched the last 2 game films on him, they like to throw the ball short. They just want to dink and dunk, and he wants to get the ball out of his hands. That means that the pressure's not necessarily going to get there. Guys are going to have to get their hands up, knock some balls down. He's still getting balls batted like crazy. He's still missing some throws that was his undoing when he was here at the end. Running backs on little over routes into the flats that he's off his target, his accuracy is off. Wide receivers, that are wide open on sail routes and seam routes that he's not accurate with. So what they've done is they've created a very, very short intermediate passing game for him to help him get the ball out of his hands and just move the chains and move down the field. So that you can get up and challenge these wide receivers. Do it. Do what you did last week without worry about being beat over the top. Because if you don't, If you sit back in zone and you let him just advance the ball, listen, they're going to keep drives alive, and they're going to score points, and they're going to make more of this game than it really should be. You know, and then pick your poison. When you get a lead and you have the ability to create pressure, then come after them, because they really want to throw the ball. All you got to do is look at them statistically. Carson's thrown 87 times. You want to know how many times they ran the football? 37 times.
Right.
I mean, are you kidding me? You're going to put the ball in that guy's hand that many times, an average of 40-plus times a game? I'm surprised all he has is three interceptions.
I think one of the biggest reasons why is because Washington has had to play come from behind football in both games. That's why they've thrown the ball 87 times. You look at Washington's stats, they're averaging almost 400 yards a game offensively. But how misleading is that? Because they've had to play catch-up in both games, which means they've had to go exclusively to the passing game. They're only averaging 86 yards a game rushing. So Antonio Gibson has not even been a factor much in the offense because they've fallen behind so much.
And the Eagles need to keep it that way.
They need to keep it that way. I agree. But my problem is I worry about, will Jonathan Gannon have his cornerbacks playing 7 to 9 yards off the wide receivers, because now we've seen they have the speed to come up and make the plays.
So, D, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm just going to come straight out with it. Everybody knows that Nick Fangio has been an advisor over there. We've seen some things out of Jonathan Gannon last week that we haven't seen,
no question,
a year and a game, okay? Is there some advising going on as far as, because some of the creative things that he did, we never saw the kind of creativity where delayed blitzes and things like that, guys coming off the slot. That was late and delayed where the quarterback, it was too late for the protection to pick it up, okay? So did Jonathan Gannon have some other playbook somewhere that he wasn't using? Or do you get the sense that some of this stuff that you're seeing comes out of Vic Fangio's playbook and he's being advised?
Well, I think he's getting advice somewhere, and I also think he's listening somewhat to the public cry. I mean, you know, a lot of defenses.
I cried all last
season. I know
season,
you did.
brother.
I had to listen to it. I know you did. I think we hear about so many defensive schemes are based off of Nick Fangio's playbook, and we're starting to see it across the league. I think Monday night Jonathan Gannon experimented a little bit more. He found out that indeed, as we all knew, he has much better talent to incorporate than he did a season ago, and he came away saying, hey, this worked. This worked a lot better than I thought it would. So I want to see him do more of that. I don't want to see every other week, because that's going to drive us nuts.
My only concern is that, you know, listen, pressure changes everything.
Absolutely.
Game, okay? So if you can create pressure, even if you've got less talent, you can make lesser talent look better because of pressure. You understand what I'm saying? And I'm not saying, let me look in the camera and let you guys know, I'm not talking about Buddy Ryan type pressure. Okay? This era of football can't stand that type of pressure. But there has to be pressure built into what you do from a defensive perspective. So people kept saying, oh, last year he didn't have this, he didn't have that. Well, if you had the kind of creativity that we saw last week, you could have done anything you wanted last year, because you could have taken some of the things that you did against the Minnesota Vikings and how uncomfortable you made Kirk Cousins. And you could have implemented that into what you did last year, and it might have won you 3 or 4 more games than you actually won, in my opinion.
You might not want to hear this, Seth, right now, but through 2 games, the Eagles' front 4 has not convinced me that they can get enough pressure on quarterbacks consistently to rely on the front 4. So with that said, I need to see more Jonathan Gannon, linebackers blitzing, cornerbacks coming down in the box, delayed safety blitzes. That's the best way to attack. And because of the versatility and athleticism on the back end of that defense, they're more than capable of doing that.
I want to see him figure out how to better utilize Hassan Reddick, okay? I mean, it's one thing to line him up in obvious passing situations at defensive end and let him go. I'm tired of looking at him in the 5-man front, drop off in coverage, and look highly inadequate at trying to cover guys, you know, in the flat, because that's not what he does, okay? Let's line him up in some 5-man front. Quarterback gets into his cadence. Let's slide to a 4-man line, pull him off the ball, okay? And let's bring him A gap, B gap. some slam stunts. Do some different things with this guy. He's too talented to be playing at a level that he's playing right now, and they didn't bring him in here to drop in the flat.
No.
And zone coverage and all that nonsense. They brought him in here because his last year in Arizona, he had double-digit sacks. His last year in Carolina, he had double-digit sacks. And they brought him in here because we don't have a double-digit sack guy. They brought him in just for that reason. So let's figure out a better way to utilize his ability and verify the reason why you brought him here and paid him all of that money.
I said it last week, and I'll say it again this week. When you look at some of the best defensive attackers in the game, what's the common denominator? They move those pieces around. You don't see Micah Parsons standing in one place. You don't see Zadarius Smith attacking all the time from one place. When I look at Hassan Reddick 2 games, he's always on one side. You got to move him around. He is not that efficient when it comes to defending run. We obviously know he can't cover in the pass. He is a pure pass rusher. Get your money's worth out of this man. Move him around and let that man attack the whole game.
Let him eat.
The other thing, I know you got to go to a break, but the other thing too is just understanding. I think we saw more stunts out of this defensive line last game than we've seen over the last year of this defense. Okay, so now how do you begin to set him up, Hassan Reddick and every other rusher on the outside, to be able to get to the quarterback? If you can run some stunts that all of a sudden makes the offensive line think about stunts, now when you go to straight pass rush, I'm thinking, oh, they might run an ET or a TE or a TT swap, So do some of that stuff. For the longest, all they did was just line up and try to win one-on-ones. One of your defensive tackles is going to get double. You got a tight end that's staying in, or you go max protect. You got a tight end and a back. Now you got 7 guys blocking 4. You can't win that.
Well, I may have repeated kindergarten, but I'm not dumb enough, ladies and gentlemen, to jump in the middle of a conversation about defense between these two. Coming back, we are going to take a closer look at Carson Wentz. We have a nice little graphic to show you guys about how the Eagles can get to him and what he's been doing as of late. We'll be back in a minute on the JAKIB Media pregame show.
At Pond Lehocky, we've recovered billions of dollars for our clients, and we're confident we can do the same for you. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured clients obtain some of the largest settlements in Pennsylvania. One conversation is all it takes to help you and your family get back on track. If you've been injured in an accident, give Pond Lehocky a call.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Android TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
The big story on Action.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction, go with trust,
Go Birds!
and go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Up and go Birds.
Welcome to Pond Lehocky. We've helped over 100,000 injured and disabled workers obtain benefits, as well as some of the biggest settlements in the state. If you've been injured at work, give Pond Lehocky a call.
Score and save in southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom Merlin safety cover in green for the birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, Birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com.
Jeff D'Ambrosio, Destination Downingtown's 5-day used car super sale. Jeff puts an end to high prices now. 5 days of the best car, truck, and SUV deals ever. Over 1,000 vehicles, every make and model. Stop overpaying. See Jeff today and get a quality car, truck, or SUV now. The 5-day used car super sale. Experience how easy it is to deal at Jeff's. Nobody treats you better. Nobody gives you more. Jeff D'Ambrosio, Destination Downingtown. GoJeffAuto.com.
Welcome back to the JAKIB Media Pregame Show. Seth Joyner, Derek Gunn, Marc Farzetta coming to you live from Ocean Casino Resort, voted Best Hotel and Casino by Travel and Leisure Magazine. We've been talking a lot about Carson Wentz. We've talked about Jalen Hurts as well. Here's Carson Wentz's numbers, looking at the first 2 weeks of the season and what he's been able to bring to the table for the Washington Commanders. If you take a look at these numbers, this is what he's been able to do with that receiving core that we mentioned earlier when talking about not just the receivers like Dotson, McLaurin, Samuel, but also Antonio Gibson coming out of the backfield, J.D. McKisson coming out of the backfield as well, making plays for this offense. We'll show you that graphic coming up in just a minute. But to just go back to the Jonathan Gannon conversation one last time, let's talk about that Carson Wentz fella. Through week 1, week 2, obviously, 27-41 completions when you look at his first week. Then in week 2, 30 for 46. What's interesting about that second week, the vast majority of that was in the second half. They didn't score a point in the first half against the Detroit Lions. They had quite the opposite of the game that the Eagles had against the Detroit Lions, including Carson Wentz being gotten to 5 times by that Detroit Lions defense. And that was just sacks. They hit him 11 times in that game. So it's almost like you needed a more mobile quarterback to go face that Detroit Lions defense.
Well, like I said off the top of the show, they were down so much in that Detroit game, they had no choice but to pass to get back in it. And, of course, Aaron Glenn has basically told you in 2 games with this Detroit defense, we're coming after you the whole game. That's what we want to see from Jonathan Gannon. We're going to come after you the whole game. That played right into Detroit's hands. And what I said about the defense, when Washington got within a touchdown, what happened? Detroit went right back down the field and scored again. So the defense of Washington is putting a lot of unnecessary stress on the offense. The offense basically has been playing one-handed because the defense has not held up its end of the bargain. If somehow, some way, Washington's defense can get some 3-and-outs and get off the field, this could be a lot more interesting game than it should be.
Certainly. When you look at Jalen Hurts' numbers and what he's been able to do through the first 2 weeks of the season, something interesting about what he has done in the past against Washington and also what he did just on Monday night against the Minnesota Vikings, particularly the number when it comes to yards per attempt. Last week, just over 10 yards per attempt for Jalen Hurts. That's the second highest yards per attempt in his career as a starting quarterback. Right. Guess who he's got the highest yards per attempt against? Well, then the Washington football team, now known as the Commanders. But if you look at these numbers also, passer rating, very high for him. If you also look at his passer rating, not just his passer, that's his quarterback rating, but QBR. You also look, his QBR. When you look at his passer rating, though, last week you're talking about one at 115.4. Absolutely incredible considering the only one that he's done it higher against is the Washington Commanders as well.
Well, the other thing, too, is nobody's talking about his completion percentage is way up there in comparison. I think he was slightly over 50% week 1, 18 of 32, I believe it was. And then last week, I mean, he completed 84% of his passes. You know, that was one of the biggest obstacles to trying to figure out whether he could be the guy was his accuracy, his completion percentage, so on and so forth. And I think he's answered some of that with the decisiveness and timing with which he's delivering the ball and what he's seeing pre-snap. Listen, he's just going to continue to get better the more he understands this offense and where everyone's supposed to be and where his outlets are and when to take off and when not to take off. When you're playing against, I'm telling you right now, if you're playing against a team that plays a lot of man and they get early pressure, he's going to take off and run. And when he's playing against teams that are zone, he's going to sit in the pocket, he's going to deliver the ball, and even when pressure gets there and he has to run because there's a protection issue, he's going to scramble horizontally to the line of scrimmage and wait for guys to come back to him. At least that's what he should be doing. But the difference between these two quarterbacks, you would look at Carson Wentz's number and think that, that offense has just torn it up and that team is 2-0.
Right.
When you look at Jalen's numbers, he's only got one passing touchdown. But I think, he's got three rushing touchdowns, and most people would be, we want to see those numbers come up. In time, they will. He's done what he's needed to do to get this team to 2-0. Carson, 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Most people would rather have those numbers than Jalen's number. I'd rather have the two W's.
Yeah, right.
I'd rather have the 2 W's than the 1-1 record with those numbers.
Well, that's why you got to think beyond the box score. It doesn't tell the whole story. It's always, I like to say, numbers never lie, but they sure as heck deceive. And Carson Wentz's numbers, I think, certainly deceive in this category. When it comes to trying to get your team in the right position to win a game, that's where Jalen Hurts really takes off. And if I was to ask for 2 totally different games, boy, you got them. When you talk about week 1 versus week 2 for Jalen Hurts and this Philadelphia Eagles team. Number 1, because you talk about another number, 17. Week 1, that's as many rushes as Jalen Hurts had. But as you so eloquently pointed out, my friend Derek Gunn, earlier in the show, when you talk about a guy running for his life, that's not a guy looking to run. That's a guy looking to make a play.
Well, and basically he has the athleticism to make the play. And that's what we've wanted to see. I think in 2 games so far, Jalen Hurts has answered a lot of questions. Would he be able to deliver the goods? What was his deep throws like? Look at the throw he made to Quez Watkins. How is he in terms of surveying the situation and getting off of his first read and going to the second and third reads in his progression? Jalen Hurts has basically shown us he's a much more mature quarterback. He goes back to after the 2021 season ended. He went right to work. He went out west and worked with the quarterback gurus. He put in the time in the film session at the NovaCare complex during the offseason. He put in the extra time during the OTAs and the mini camp and in training camp, and it's all paying off now. I think the best thing Jalen Hurts said leading up to this game this week when he spoke to the media was, I just want to win. And by that he means whatever he has to do to help this team win football games, that's what he's willing to do.
I certainly agree with that. Now, to put the quarterback in this Jonathan Gannon machine for just a second, over the 3 quarters that the Eagles played the Detroit Lions, the first 3 quarters, I was impressed, pleasantly surprised. I told you last week, Seth, pleasantly surprised by what I saw from Jonathan Gannon's defense through 3 quarters against the Lions. 4th quarter, it all went out the window. Through 4 quarters last week, or rather Monday night again against the Minnesota Vikings, I was blown away with what I saw from Jonathan Gannon. Then I listened to his press conference earlier in the week, and he talks about how, we're always going to play to the matchups. We're never going to really have that scheme that he talked about a little bit last year. Rather, we're going to have something that we feel we can throw in the face of our opponents that is the best for that matchup. At what point do you think this defense, Seth, will get to the point of, you know what, no, this is what we do best, you deal with it. Not a scheming to just expose what might be your weaknesses, which I understand is just the basis of game planning. But no, this is what we do well. This is what we can do better with a guy like Hassan Reddick with our defensive line. At what point did you just say, hey, this is what we got, you deal with it?
The problem is that's the mentality of a bend but don't break style defensive coordinator. They're never in the mode of, we're going to force your hand. They're in the mode of, we're going to figure out, how to scheme you. Okay, I'm not a big fan of that. I want to force your quarterback's hands. I want to speed up his clock. I want him to speed up. I want to speed up his clock. I want him to think about, what I'm going to do to him. All of those things, are really, really important to, how you change the dynamic of your defense. Now, listen, this is the same Jonathan Gannon that said last year, we're not a dime team. And then 2 weeks later, I caught him in dime and took a snapshot of it and put it up on my social media and was like, oh yeah, you are a dime team. The audacity to say it's one thing to say that, you know what, we're not a dime team. It's the audacity to say it where the other 31 teams in the league can actually hear you say it, and now game plan against you. And then all of a sudden have to eat crow and go back 2 weeks after that and implement a dime package into your package. He is going to get to a point where he understands that, you know what, stop all the scheming. You know, you already have your scheme. You're a 4-man front, you're a 5-man front. You're going to just jump back and forth between that scheme. Now, what can you do every single week that puts quarterbacks on alert and creates pressure? Play the way you played on Monday night. Yep. If you play that way every single day, you know, now are there some quarterbacks you can't do? You're not going to do that against Tom Brady.
Right.
You're not going to do that against Aaron Rodgers because they're going to get a pre-snap read, find the best matchup. They're going to hurt you. So now you got to be a little more creative. But when you're playing against a guy like Jeff Goff, Kirk Cousins, Carson Wentz, just if it ain't broke, don't fix it, man. Just keep bringing it. Yeah. And I mean keep bringing it until there's 2 minutes left and there's not a snowball chance in hell that they can come back. Not into the third quarter or the fourth quarter where you're going to give them a chance to get back in the game. Right. No, slam the door. You know, put your finger or your foot on their neck and hold it there until they tap out.
Well, Gunnar, one of the things that came up in the conversation during the press conference with Nick Sirianni right after the Vikings game was the idea of, how have you scouted Carson Wentz? Have you talked to Frank Reich, for instance? And Nick Sirianni's response was basically like, I've talked to everybody, and we have enough resources in the building to have a conversation about Carson Wentz and learn things about Carson Wentz. So on the defensive side of things, then nobody else should know more than the Philadelphia Eagles that you can force Carson Wentz into making mistakes because he still very much has that hero gene that we saw him have here in Philadelphia where, no, this play is not dead. I got a rusher in my face. I can brush him off. I can throw the ball downfield. I can make that play. He ends up throwing an interception, a bad pass. He ends up fumbling the football, whatever it might be. So do you think that is at the forefront of Jonathan Gannon's mind today to force him into mistakes?
Well, it better be because it worked so well against Minnesota on Monday night against a veteran quarterback like Kirk Cousins. You know, I know a lot of people in this region are still frustrated with Carson because he's never lived up to the expectations of what they thought he would be beyond that 2017 season. And after that, he basically spiraled downward to the point where the Philadelphia Eagles thought it was better to separate themselves from him. But I will say this about a Carson Wentz. He does have the athleticism to beat you in the game. Carson Wentz is a competitor. If you let him sit back there, he will pick you apart. We've seen that. Jonathan Gannon cannot play Carson Wentz's game. You have to force Carson Wentz to play your game. And by that means make him make mistakes. Speed up his clock, his passing clock a lot quicker. That's when he gets into trouble. Carson Wentz has the capability of also stepping up and taking off and running against you as well. Carson Wentz has been very low-key leading up to this game about what he feels about the Philadelphia Eagles, and he said all the right things about my time here was great. It was a great learning experience. I've got some great friends still in Philadelphia. I could have been a better teammate. I could have been a better leader. Do you realize how much this is eating him up inside? Nobody wants this game more for the Washington fan base than Carson Wentz to prove to the Philadelphia Eagles organization you made a mistake by letting me go.
Well, speaking of that Washington fan base behind enemy lines right now, our friend John McMullen's joining us from FedEx Field. John McMullen right here, JAKIB Media. John, good to have you along for the ride here, and just want to talk real quick about Carson Wentz and whether or not you buy into the idea of this being just another game.
Oh, no, not at all. I heard D-Gun saying what he said. Nick Sirianni talked about, look, he's coached for a lot of teams. When you come back and you face that team you're with, it's just human nature. You want to do a little bit more. Yep. We talked about it last week with Jalen Reagor a little bit, and, you know, that got a lot of play. Jalen was like, he was specifically asked the question, do you want revenge against the Eagles? And he said, yeah, sure, why not? You know, he wanted to do well, but at the same time, you know, Jordan Mailata was just out at midfield giving Carson Wentz a hug. There are a number of players on this team that really like Carson, that still like Carson. Jason Kelsey, Lane Johnson, Fletcher Cox loved Carson Wentz, still loves Carson Wentz. So there is some stuff I think that is a little bit overblown in that the entire team turned on Carson. But no doubt he wants to play well against the Philadelphia Eagles. And I also heard you talking, Mark. Yeah, he might press. That might be, you might be able to take that as an advantage because this is a guy who presses and won't give up on plays versus normal teams and normal games in every week. So when he's trying to do a little bit more than even that, he might be susceptible to mistakes.
John, do you agree that Gannon cannot just rely on his four-man front to rattle Carson, that he's going to have to bring extra pressure to get into Carson's face a little bit more?
Yeah, well, the pressure thing, I go back and forth. So you go week 1 versus week 2, right? DeAndre Swift is averaging 10 yards a carry. So
right.
If Antonio Gibson is averaging 10 yards a carry, you're not going to see a lot of pressure. If they bottle up Antonio Gibson like they bottled up Dalvin Cook, you're probably going to see more pressure. That's just the nature of this defense. They always want to get home with 4 defensive linemen. I mean, always. That's the preference. Washington is dealing with some injuries. They lost Chase Roullier, their starting center, last week, so they have a backup center. They're not as good as they once were. That was once the strength of this team when Trent Williams was here and Brandon Sheriff. The offensive line was great. It's not that same offensive line. I know the Eagles think they have a big advantage with their defensive line versus Washington's O-line. Unfortunately, and I know Seth is not going to like this, they want to get home with 4.
Hey, listen, John, I get it, but you want to know something? The pass rush in a lot of ways, my friend, is just like the running game on the offensive side of the ball. You want to run the ball, you want to establish the run early, but at the end of the day, if it ain't working, you got to do something different. It's been the same situation on the defensive side of the ball as far as the pass rush is concerned. You want to get home with 4, but the fact of the matter is you haven't gotten there with 4. So how long, you run this risk of trying to get there with 4 and not getting there and letting Carson Wentz get into a rhythm and let him find his footing rather than out the gate applying pressure and then allowing that pressure through fakes and sugars and all these different things that you can do to allow your 4-man to get there. You understand what I'm saying? You kind of reverse engineering.
Yeah.
It's almost like, people say, oh, you run the ball to be able to pass, and sometimes you got to pass it to be able to run it. Well, guess what? You can blitz to be able to get there with 4, and oftentimes, you can bring 4, and if you really want to turn it up, bring 5 or 6.
Yeah, and, last week they were more aggressive to try to stop the run with run blitzes as well, so that factors into it. So I hear what you're saying, Seth. In the case of this particular game, I do think they look at the Washington offensive line and say, okay, that's a weakness now. So we shouldn't have to do that. Then you have the chicken and egg sentiment of, all right, the Eagles don't have a ton of sacks, but they got a ton of pressure on Kirk Cousins. Mm-hmm. That's just a quarterback who's going to get the football out. So you're not going to sack him a ton, but what happens on the back end? You have 3 red zone interceptions. So there are other good things that can happen if you got pressure. The Eagles got tremendous pressure on Monday night. I think if everybody sees that, they're happy with it. But if you look at the score sheet, they didn't have a lot of sacks, but they got tons of pressure and they created tons of plays defensively. I think that's the goal. This team constantly talks about, constantly, guys. Nick Sirianni, Jonathan Gannon, Shane Steichen, everybody. They look at 2 statistics. They want to win the turnover battle, and they want to win the explosive play battle. And the analytics say if you win those two categories, you're going to win the football game. Everything else, you can throw for 400 yards and lose. We see that all the time. You can run for 200 and lose. You could have 8 sacks like the Tennessee Titans in the AFC Championship game and lose. If you win those 2, if you win the turnover battle, and if you win the explosive play battle, you're going to win the football game. That's what the Eagles care about. That's it. And to the point where, I was talking about kick returns. Kick returns, little nitpicking here, but they were awful. And they don't care. As long as they're winning the explosive play battle, the turnover battle, they don't care about everything else. It's white noise.
John, they don't care about, the kicking game and the return game until it becomes a factor. And you're better off addressing it before it comes a factor than having to lose a game to realize that, you need a punt returner and a kick returner. I mean, you're talking about field position. It's very evident to anybody who's watching the Eagles play these games. Quez Watkins doesn't want to return those kicks, man. He just doesn't. And teams are just, they're going to keep kicking it to the 5-yard line and forcing him to run them, you know, and he's just pity-patting and, you know, doing what he's doing. Now, listen, the guys up front in front of him, they've got to block for him. They've got to open up some lanes. But sometimes, you know, when you're doing that job, you just got to pick a hole and just take off and go as fast as you can through that hole. It's pretty darn obvious to everyone who's watching that he wants no part of that. Go find you a kick returner, okay? You can talk about Britton Covey. Yes, he feels the ball. You want him to do that. Guys have got to block. But you know what? You better go get you a guy that every once in a while can create and flip field position for you, and you better do it before it turns into an issue, in my opinion.
No, I'm with you. In fact, I wrote about that on JAKIB Sports, and that's one of the things where I said, you know, Nick was very flippant about, I think Minnesota did one good thing in their game plan. It was such a bad game plan. They did one good thing, and they told Greg Joseph, their kicker, to use those mortar kicks and force Quez Watkins to return the football. As you mentioned, Seth, he doesn't look like he wants to return the football, number one. They were playing on long fields. And then you get to the end of the game, right? They were able to take advantage because Minnesota had a really, really poor defense. If you're playing a good defense and you have long fields, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
You're in trouble. And they're going to be tested. So I'm with you. They need to figure out this sooner rather than later. I think it should be Boston Scott, who's not going to be explosive.
I agree.
Not going to be a threat to take one home. But he'll get you to the 25. Maybe he'll get you to the 30, 35 if it's well blocked. That's all. What you can't have is those long fields. And Paul Domowitch came up with this stat. 5 out of 6 times before Monday night, the Eagles have lost when they had starting field position minus 20. So Nick Sirianni might want to look at that analytic before saying, all right, we sliced and diced a bad defense. Yeah, you did. But if a good defense shows up and you have that long field, you're going to be behind the 8 ball for the entire game.
Hey, John, does this need to be a coming out game for Hassan Reddick today? We've been waiting so long for him to get this so-called sack, you know, because of his pedigree coming into the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't think Gannon has utilized him to the best of his ability yet. He's a pure pass rusher. He's not a cover guy. He's not very good against the run. But if he can get a couple of sacks, I think that'll help a lot of people breathe a little bit better in terms of a sigh of relief.
Yeah, sometimes styles make fights, D-Gun.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
If you look at you know, Decker and Sewell in week 1, really good tackles. Brian O'Neill, really good tackle week 2. And that's normally where Hassan Reddick's going to line up to rush the passer. This week it's Sam Cosmi, it's Charles Leno, so maybe he has more of an opportunity. I do think this is a game where we need to see something from Hassan Reddick. Yeah. Otherwise, you start to say, what's going on here? Yeah. But also, I think, you know, Jonathan Gannon needs to move him around a little bit more.
Thank you.
If Brian O'Neill's on the other side, maybe take advantage of Garrett Bradbury, have Hassan Reddick rushing from the inside. I think he needs to do more of that and figure out what the best matchups are.
John, I'm not asking you to predict his final stat line, but is the stage at least set for Jalen Hurts to show some more consistency at the quarterback position, have another great game for himself?
I'm going under 83.9. I don't want to be a hater, but I don't think he's going to complete 83.9% of his passes. I think Washington is going to be in the zip code of the receivers, so it'll be a little bit more difficult. But look, Jalen Hurts is playing at a really high level. They're a better team. They're a more talented team. Now, it is a division game. Seth will tell you, division games tend to be, there's such a familiarity. They tend to be closer than teams that maybe don't know you as well. So I think this will be a bigger test for Jalen Hurts, and I expect them to pass it. I expect them to win the game.
All right. I liked it. Can I get your final prediction then?
I think Eagles winning 26-20. So
wow,
maybe a little bit tougher than people think it's going to be, but it's a road game. I know it's going to be about 50-50, probably Eagles fans, Commanders fans, but that division aspect of it, the familiarity aspect of it, and it's a short week too for the Eagles going on the road. So that's a little bit, even though it's a short road trip, that hurts a little bit as well.
Understood. John McMullen, our Eagles reporter here at JAKIB Media. Thanks so much for joining us from FedEx Field. Hope you get to enjoy the game a little bit, my friend.
All right, thanks, guys.
Absolutely. John McMullen is joining us from JAKIB, from FedEx Field.
The worst media field in the NFL, by the way.
1,000% agree.
There's no question about it. They ought to blow that thing up yesterday.
And truth be told, it's smelly. I'm not even kidding. It smells bad.
I've been
I'm not
there
even kidding.
too many times.
Well, congratulations on being here at Ocean Casino as opposed to FedEx Field.
This is like Camelot compared to going down there.
We'll be back with more Eagles coverage coming up in a minute.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Celebrating the life of your loved one is what we do at Life Celebrations by Givnish. When the matriarch of the Dalloway family died suddenly at 82 years old, Life Celebrations by Givnish stepped in.
They will make this the easiest thing that I know it's not easy, but they will make this as easy as possible.
Life Celebrations by Givnish, customizing services as unique as the individual.
I just know that my dad, who is in charge of everything, was not in charge of anything at that point when my mom passed. And again, just another shout out to this place for making it easy.
Turning tragedy into a celebration of life, no matter how hard, is what we do at Life Celebrations by Givnish. Life Celebrations by Givnish, customizing services as unique as the individual.
The faces you know, the team you trust. The Delaware Valley's leading news program, Action News.
Go for the beers, go for the cheers, go for the hit and the hits, go for the scene, go for the screens, go for the gallery, go for the win, go to Ocean.
Welcome back to live pregame show, that is, by JAKIB Media here at the amazing Ocean Casino Resort, the live gallery bar, book, and games as well. We got our Eagles predictions coming up in just a second here. But first off, I wanted to ask this question. We've talked a lot about Hassan Reddick, and he's a guy that needs to step up, or the Eagles and Jonathan Gannon need to find a way to have him step up, scheme a little bit more towards his strengths. But has there been one guy, fellas, one guy so far this season in the first two games that has jumped out and been more of a pleasant surprise? Someone more than Jalen Hurts, or put him aside for a second. We've acknowledged what he's been able to do. But Seth, I'll start with you. Who's been someone who's been a pleasant surprise to you so far this season?
I think Miles Sanders. I think
stole
that,
mine.
I think. Well, you know, I mean, you'll have some interjections, I'm sure. I'll keep mine short so we can share them. You know, with 90 yards rushing in week 1 and 80 yards in week 2, I think that a lot of people, especially in fantasy and whatnot, didn't necessarily see him as that guy. I did not like in the first game, they said, oh, you know, Miles is our guy. Sirianni, everybody, Miles is our guy. Then why the hell you put Boston Scott and Gainwell in the game to get those little, I mean, this dude hasn't had a touchdown since 2019. And you're on the 1 yard line, he gets the first one in, rightly he deserved that one. Leave him in there to get the other two. I mean, what? I don't understand that. I don't get that. There's no mystery to what you do. If he's your number one guy, I don't care if his tongue is on the ground. I'm gonna leave him in there because I want him to get some. I mean, success breeds, you know, confidence, I should say, breeds success. So leave him out there and let him play. You know, especially in those situations. But you know, I'm impressed with what he's done. He looks healthy. He looks hungry. He's playing really, really well. And a lot of people didn't look at Miles Sanders and believe that he had anything left. They're looking to next year and moving to finding our next franchise running back.
Right. Other than Miles Sanders, Gunner? Anybody jump out to you?
Well, Miles Sanders,
since he took Miles Sanders, let me say this. Let me add this about Miles Sanders. Miles is playing with a purpose. Okay, he understands there's a lot of doubters out there about his capability and his durability. He's putting his foot in the ground. The thing that's most impressive about him is he's putting his foot in the ground in one step, getting up the field. He's not dancing behind the line of scrimmage last year like Fred Astaire anymore, okay? So he's playing football with a purpose. He knows that the organization has some question marks about him. He also knows he's auditioning for 31 other teams in the National Football League. But because Seth took Miles Sanders, I'm going to say C.J. Gardner-Johnson. This guy came here at the last minute. You could tell he felt a little bit out of place that first game, but man, did he step in that second game. You look at his acceleration to the ball, his ability to get there before the receiver can get the ball and be disruptive. I think for a guy who's been here a short amount of time as he has, I think he's adapted very quickly to what this scheme is all about.
And I think, and Mark, I think he will get better as the season progresses, because the thing that you see with him is I didn't think he tackled particularly well last week.
Right.
You know, and when you look at film on him when he was with the Saints, it's one of the areas he was really, really proficient in. I think he's an all-around player. There's no doubt about it. Whether you put him in the slot or whether you put him in safety, he's an all-around player. But he's been a better tackler than what we saw last week. And I think that, again, with confidence and familiarity, the more he plays in this defense, the more he's going to be able to accelerate in those areas that he's been better at,
yes.
You know, because when you know what you're doing beyond a shadow of a doubt, now you can play 110 miles an hour. Right now he's playing at about 75, 80, you know, because he's not sure, 100% sure, and you can watch in his play and see that.
Yeah, to go through your progression of having maybe some confidence and then success, and that breeding the other. The other is just being comfortable in the scheme and understanding what your assignment is, and just knowing, you know, having the knowledge of what you're supposed to be doing on any given play in that scheme.
Well, that's what I meant.
Yeah, no. It adds to it. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man.
Guys that have jumped out to me, certainly, I think Quez Watkins taking the top off the defense last week. A little bit of a coverage mistake there by the Vikings, to say the least. And then another guy who I think finished the season very strong. It's a position that we often talk about that the Eagles haven't addressed until they took Nakobe Dean, but T.J. Edwards had a fine year for himself last year, and that seems to have just carried over into the first 2 weeks of this season as well. So those are a couple other guys that have been some pleasant surprises so far for the Eagles this year. Now it comes time for, well, I think the number one reason people tune in, our thoughts on whether or not they are going to win this game. Eagles come in here against the Washington Commanders, against Carson Wentz, the 1-1 Washington Commanders, the 2-0 Philadelphia Eagles. Who would like to go first with their prediction for today's game?
You know, I drive a lot when I'm here in Philly, a lot. And it's like, so I'm always listening to the radio, and I'm listening, to somebody on IP last night talking about he's not really sold on the Eagles, and are the Eagles that good, or was Kirk Cousins just that bad? I will say this: they forced Kirk Cousins to be the Kirk Cousins that he was. It was not one of those situations where he just came out and was just stinking it up. Okay, Slade's coverage, Gannison's pressure, all of those things played a factor. Those things will play a factor today. If he sits back, Carson Wentz can make some plays, and he will make some throws. He can still make every throw that a professional quarterback needs, or elite level quarterback needs to make, okay? But if you put pressure on him, that's the game changer, and just as long as the Eagles do what they did, just stick to the game plan, do what you did last week, and everything will be fine. And I just believe that, I think that if there's some motivation on Carson's part, there's certainly some motivation on the Eagles' part. There's some guys that liked him, there's some guys that didn't like him, and there's some guys that want to do some things to him. And so I just think that the Eagles come into this game understanding that it's a division game, how important it is. You want to win as many games as you possibly can. I think the Eagles go in this week and win this game 32-20. I'm being generous with the 20 too, but I just want to let y'all know the last 2 weeks I've been spot on with how many points the Eagles scored, 38 and 24. Those were my predictions.
32 is an odd number, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an odd number. They might get a safety or something this week.
See that? It's Carson they're playing against.
Hey, if they're playing against Carson, you never know.
Yeah, right.
You saw what he did in the end zone last year.
About that.
Okay.
You're right.
D-Gun, what do you got?
This Eagles offense leads the NFL in explosive plays with 28. Washington gave up 6 explosive plays to Detroit just a week ago. I don't think that Washington is going to be able to fix all of their problems on defense. I think the Eagles are going to have their share of explosive plays. And, number one, this is the first NFC East game of the season. Number two, this is going to be a home game for Philadelphia Eagles fans because they're going to be more Eagles cheers in the stands, and that's going to be frustrating. Did you know the first 2 games of the season in attendance-wise, Washington has generated the lowest attendance across the league of any team in the National Football League? When I covered the Eagles and went down to D.C., it was always a louder Eagle fan contingent than it was a Washington fan. Because there's such a discrepancy in terms of overall talent between the two teams, I think the Eagles are going to win this game 37-27, and the only reason Washington's going to get 27 points is because they're going to be playing catch-up ball again, and the Eagles are going to call off the dogs.
Yeah, I see a similar outlet that you guys have as well, but I'm going to go a little bit more, I'm going to say cocky, and I didn't think I'd be the most bold prediction when we started the show, but I have this as being an easy one for the Eagles at 37-13. I don't have any respect for that Washington offense, rather, when it comes to Carson Wentz and the way this Eagles defense has played to this point this season. I don't care if it's Vic Fangio and his input on the scheme or whatever it might be. The bottom line is the Eagles are doing it. I think this will be a game where, very much like last week against Kirk Cousins in week 2, they'll do the same thing against Carson Wentz, force him into making mistakes. And Carson Wentz, as I said earlier, still has very much that hero gene that he had here in Philly, where no play is over, he can always make a play, and that's what will lead to mistakes and the Eagles taking care of business.
And if I'm this Eagles coaching staff all week long, I'm telling my guys, if you lose this game, do you understand potentially you could be in a 4-way tie for first place after 3 weeks? Because Dallas plays the Giants tomorrow night. If Dallas beats the Giants, you got all 4 teams at 2-1 right now. Washington found a way to win this game today.
That's right.
That's motivation in itself.
It should be. It should be.
I'm not even bringing that 2-letter word in my locker room. If.
Yeah, there you go.
I agree.
I'm like, because my mentality is more like, if you lose to these bums, you're going to run all week.
They don't run anymore.
of
Thanks to the
running,
new collective bargaining
but
agreement.
there you go. That's my point.
Yeah.
How's this for Speaking of running, we got to run right now.
Oh, what a great
How
transition.
about that? He's a pro, gentlemen.
What
All
a
right.
transition.
For Seth Joyner, Eagles Hall of Famer himself, for the veteran reporter, JAKIB Media Sports as well, Derek Gunn. My name is Marc Farzetta. Thanks for watching the JAKIB Media pregame show here at Ocean Casino Resort.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Philadelphia fans, we're cut from a different cloth. Born into a brotherhood and bonded to our team for life. We believe anything is possible because we've witnessed the impossible. While we may be from different neighborhoods, come Sunday, we are one, and we will be heard. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction, go with trust,
Go Birds!
and go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Score and save this football season on your car insurance. Before the next game, save up to 40% on your auto insurance policy. That's right, 40% savings. Call an audible this season and contact the Del Val Insurance Group. They're an advocate for you, not an insurance company. That means they'll get you the right coverage and save you up to 40%. Call managing partners Fran or Jim of Del Val Insurance, 215-354-0122, or score and save at dvigi.com. dvigi.com.
Jeff D'Ambrosio, Destination Downingtown's 5-day used car super sale. Jeff puts an end to high prices now. 5 days of the best car, truck, and SUV deals ever. Over 1,000 vehicles, every make and model. Stop overpaying. See Jeff today and get a quality car, truck, or SUV now. The 5-day used car super sale. Experience how easy it is to deal at Jeff's. Nobody treats you better. Nobody gives you more. Jeff D'Ambrosio, Destination Downingtown. GoJeffAuto.com.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer 3 major services, the first one being basement waterproofing, the second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs, and then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Welcome to Pondley Hockey. We've helped over 100,000 injured and disabled workers obtain benefits, as well as some of the biggest settlements in the state. If you've been injured at work, give Pondley Hockey a call.
Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean.
Over the last 17 years, we've built a reputation of growing award-winning teams across the country. Staffing is not easy, but that's what we do every day, all day. The key to our success is storytelling, asking the right questions to find the right people. Hi, I'm Gary Kane, president of Kane Partners. We want to be your staffing partner.